When I saw the flames devouring my house, the only thing I could think of was to run to my son. Michael was all I had left after his father died 3 years ago. I never imagined that on that night, standing at his front door with a suitcase, damp and with ashes in my hair, I would hear the words that would shatter my soul forever. "Mom, Jessica says you can't stay here." The world stopped. The rain was still falling on my shoulders, but I no longer felt it. My son, the same one I had nursed through long nights when he had a fever, the one I comforted when he cried from nightmares, was closing the door on me when I needed him the most. "What do you mean I can't stay? Michael, my house burned to the ground. I have nowhere to go." Jessica appeared behind him, with that fake smile I knew so well. For years, she had pretended to tolerate me at family dinners, but now her mask had fallen. "Claire, you have to understand, we have our own responsibilities. We can't take you in right now." Take me in, as if I were a burden, an inconvenience, as if the 35 years I dedicated to raising that man meant nothing. But let me tell you how I got there, because this story began long before that terrible night. 6 months ago, everything seemed to be in its place. Sunday family dinners were a sacred part of our routine. I would arrive at 2 o'clock in the afternoon with my famous apple pie, the same one Michael had adored since he was a child. The table would be set with the plates Jessica had chosen for her wedding, white with small blue flowers that I never liked, but learned to tolerate. Jessica always greeted me with a kiss on the cheek that felt like ice. "Hi, Claire, so glad you could make it." But her eyes said something else. Her eyes always told me that I was an outsider in that house, which had once been my Sunday refuge. Michael would hug me with his usual lukewarm affection, but lately, something had changed. His hugs were shorter, his smile seemed forced, and whenever we talked, Jessica would always find an excuse to interrupt. "Honey, can you help me in the kitchen?" she would say just as I was starting to tell him about my week, or even worse, "Michael, your mother is talking a lot. I think she's been a little confused lately." Confused. That word started appearing more and more in our conversations. Jessica used it like a subtle knife, slicing my dignity into tiny pieces that no one else seemed to notice. I should have realized something was wrong when Jessica started making comments about my house. "Claire, don't you think it's too big for you all alone? A woman your age could have an accident. Those stairs are dangerous." She said it with such fake concern that it made me want to laugh, but Michael would nod as if her words were those of an experienced doctor. My house, my sanctuary, the place where I had raised my son, where I had mourned my husband's death, where I had built my life for 40 years. Jessica saw it as an obstacle, as something that stood in the way of her plans. The last Sunday before the fire, something strange happened. I arrived as usual, but Jessica had a guest. A woman I did not know was sitting in my usual chair, a middle-aged blonde with a smile that was too perfect. "Claire, I'd like you to meet Brenda. She's a real estate agent. I was just telling her about your situation." "My situation? What situation?" Brenda extended her hand with a professional smile. "Jessica told me you're considering selling your house. What a smart decision. At your age, it's the most sensible thing to do." I looked at Jessica in disbelief. "I never said I wanted to sell my house." Jessica laughed with that nervous laugh she used when she was lying. "Oh, Claire, don't you remember? Last week you were worried about the upkeep, about the bills." A lie. It was all a lie, but Michael was there, nodding, as if my memory were an old rag that was no longer useful. That night I left their house with a knot in my stomach. As I drove back, I could not stop thinking about the way Jessica had talked about me as if I were not there, as if I were a child who needed others to make decisions for her. I got to my house and poured myself a cup of chamomile tea. I sat in my favorite armchair, the same one where I had nursed Michael, where I had read thousands of bedtime stories, where I had planned every birthday and every Christmas to make my family happy. The house smelled of the flowers from my garden, coming in through the open window. Everything was in its place. The photographs of our family on the mantelpiece, the books I had collected over the years, the blanket I had knitted the previous winter. My entire life was contained within those walls, and Jessica wanted me to sell it like a piece of old furniture. That morning, I woke up to the smell of smoke. The smell was so strong that it jolted me awake. At first, I thought it was my imagination. those strange dreams I sometimes have since I was widowed. But when I opened my eyes, reality hit me like a slap in the face. There was an orange glow dancing on the walls of my bedroom. I got out of bed with my heart pounding in my chest. The hallway was filled with gray smoke that burned my eyes and throat. The flames were coming from downstairs, from the living room where just a few hours ago I had been drinking my chamomile tea, thinking about Jessica's lies. I ran to my closet and pulled out the suitcase I had used for my honeymoon with my husband so many years ago. My hands trembled as I packed the essentials: some photographs, important documents, the few clothes I could grab. The smoke was getting thicker, more suffocating. I went down the stairs, clinging to the handrail, coughing, my eyes filled with tears I did not know were from the smoke or from despair. My living room, my kitchen, everything was turning to ashes. 40 years of memories disappearing in a matter of minutes. I got out onto the street just as the firefighters arrived. I stood there, barefoot on the cold pavement, watching the flames devour my entire life. The neighbors came over with blankets and words of comfort. But I could only think of one thing. I needed to go to my son. Sarah, my lifelong neighbor, lent me her car after the firefighters had finished their work. "Claire, are you sure you don't want me to come with you?" she asked with the sweetness only true friends have. "No, thank you. Michael is going to be so worried when he finds out what happened. I need to be with him." How naive I was. I thought my son would welcome me with open arms, that Jessica would understand it was an emergency. That family comes together in difficult times. But I was about to discover that my daughter-in-law had other plans. I arrived at their house around 10 o'clock at night. The lights were on, and I could hear the television from outside. I rang the doorbell with hope, carrying my suitcase soaked by the firefighter's hose. When Michael opened the door, his expression was not what I expected. "Mom, what are you doing here so late?" "Son, my house burned down. I have nowhere to sleep." Jessica appeared immediately, as if she had been waiting behind the door. She was wearing that pink silk nightgown that always seemed too elegant for being at home. Her hair was perfectly styled, as if she had not been getting ready for bed. "It burned down? How did that happen?" she asked. But something in her tone sounded strange. There was no genuine surprise. Not the shock you would expect when someone tells you about such a tragedy. "I don't know. I woke up to the smell of smoke, and the entire ground floor was in flames." Jessica and Michael exchanged a look that I could not interpret at that moment. Now, thinking back, it was the look of two people sharing a secret. "Well, but I can stay here tonight, right? Tomorrow I'll look for a hotel while I sort out the insurance." It was then that Jessica uttered those words that broke my soul. "Claire, you have to understand. We have our own responsibilities. We can't take you in right now." Michael said nothing. My son, the man who had grown up in my arms, stood silent while his wife slammed the door in my face at the worst moment of my life. "But, son, it's just for tonight. My house burned down completely." "Mom, you know how. Jessica Island. She's been really stressed with work lately. Maybe you could call a friend or find a hotel." "A hotel?" My own son was suggesting I go to a hotel instead of offering me the couch in his living room. Jessica smiled from behind him. That satisfied smile of someone who has just won a battle. "Besides, Claire, I think this is a sign. It was about time you made some changes in your life. A woman your age shouldn't be living alone in such a big house." A sign, as if the fire that destroyed my home was a blessing in disguise, as if losing everything I owned was exactly what I needed. I stood there in the rain that had started to fall, watching the door slowly close. I heard the sound of the deadbolt, as if my own son were locking me out of his life. The rain soaked my clothes, my hair, my suitcase. But inside, something deeper was getting wet. My faith in family, my trust in unconditional love, my belief that blood will always be thicker than water. I walked to Sarah's car and sat inside, without starting it. I needed to think. I needed to understand what had just happened. My house had burned down, that was clear. But there was something more. Something in the way Jessica had reacted. Something in that look she had exchanged with Michael. It was then that I remembered the conversation from the previous Sunday. Jessica talking to the real estate agent about selling my house. Jessica saying I had expressed concerns I never expressed. Jessica planning my future without consulting me. A terrible idea began to form in my mind. An idea so horrible that I tried to push it away, but it stayed there, growing like a poisonous seed. What if the fire had not been an accident? That night I slept in Sarah's car, parked in front of a hotel I could not afford. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the flames devouring my living room, but I also saw Jessica's face when I told her about the fire. There was no surprise in her eyes. There was something worse. Satisfaction. At 6 a.m, Sarah found me shivering from the cold. "Oh, Claire, what are you doing here? I thought you were staying with Michael." I could not tell her the whole truth. It was too humiliating to admit that my own son had closed the door on me. Jessica is very stressed. I didn't want to be a burden. Sarah took me to her house and made me coffee with milk, just like my mother used to do when I was a child and had nightmares. But this nightmare was real, and there was no way to wake up from it. "Stay here as long as you need," she said as she handed me a clean towel. "My house is your house," but I knew I could not abuse her kindness. Sarah was a widow like me, living on her pension, and she already had enough problems of her own without taking on mine. After breakfast, I called the insurance company. The conversation was one blow after another. The agent explained with forced patience that they would need investigations, appraisals, documents that had probably burned in the fire. "Mrs. Claire, these processes take time. It could be months before you see a dime." Months. I did not have months. I barely had enough savings to survive a few weeks. And that was if I was very careful with every dollar. That afternoon I decided to go back to what was left of my house. I needed to search through the rubble to see if I had saved anything important. But when I got there, I found a surprise that froze my blood. Jessica was there. She was standing in front of the remains of my home, talking on the phone with someone. She was wearing jeans and a white blouse, as if it were a normal day, as if she were not walking on the ashes of my life. I hid behind Sarah's car and tried to listen to her conversation. Yes, it burned down completely. "No, she's fine, but obviously she can't keep living alone." Exactly. Now she's going to have to make more sensible decisions about her future. My heart started beating so fast I was afraid Jessica could hear it. She kept talking, and every word was like a nail in my coffin. "The insurance will take months, and she has nowhere to live. She's going to have to sell the lot fast, at any price. Yes, I can take care of those arrangements. After all, Michael is her only son." I could not breathe. Jessica was planning to sell my land. She was talking about my future as if I no longer had a say in my own life. When she hung up the phone, she continued to walk among the rubble with an expression I had never seen on her face before. It was not sadness or compassion. It was triumph. Jessica looked like someone who had just won the lottery. She walked over to what had been my garden and kicked some burnt bricks. Then she took out her phone again and took several pictures. Why did she need pictures? Of my tragedy? I waited until she left to approach my house. The smell of burnt smoke was still strong, but there was something else. A chemical smell that I could not identify. Something that did not seem natural. I walked to where my kitchen had been. The refrigerator was completely melted. The stove was a twisted pile of metal. But something caught my eye on the floor, near where my breakfast table used to be. There was broken glass, but not from the windows. This glass was thicker, like from a bottle, and it had a greenish color that I recognized immediately. It was from a bottle of paint thinner, the liquid my husband used to clean his brushes when he painted the house. But I did not have paint thinner in my kitchen. I had never kept chemicals like that inside my house. Someone had been in my house that night. Someone had left that bottle there, and that someone had started the fire that destroyed my life. My hands trembled as I picked up one of the glass shards. It was the evidence that this had all been planned. My house had not burned down by accident. Someone had burned it intentionally. But who and why? The pieces of the puzzle began to fit together in my mind like a horror movie. Jessica asking about my house for months. Jessica saying it was too big for me. Jessica introducing me to the real estate agent without my permission. Jessica acting as if my memory loss were real when I had never had memory problems. And now Jessica was at my burned-out house, making plans to sell my land. It had all been a plan. A plan to get me out of my house. to take away my independence, to force me to depend on them. And when that did not work fast enough, they decided to speed up the process. They set my house on fire, my own son and his wife. They set my house on fire to force me to sell my land and be left with nothing. I sat among the rubble of what was once my home, and for the first time in 3 days I cried. I cried for my house, for my memories, for the photographs that were lost forever. But most of all, I cried for the greatest betrayal of my life. Michael, my only son, the boy who had grown up in my arms, had agreed to this. But as I sat there crying, something else began to grow inside me. It was not just sadness or pain. It was something colder, more calculated. It was rage. And rage, I discovered, can be the most powerful fuel in the world. The rage woke me at 4 a.m. It was not the hot, desperate rage I had felt the day before. It was something cold, methodical, that filled me with a clarity I had not had in years. I got up from Sarah's couch, without making a sound, and sat in her kitchen with a cup of tea. I needed to think. I needed a plan. Jessica and Michael thought they had defeated me, that I was a helpless old woman with no resources or options. But they were wrong. I had something they did not know I had. Something I had kept as a secret for years, because my husband had always told me it was important to have a few cards up your sleeve in life. Arthur. I had not spoken to him in 5 years, but I knew he still lived in the same city. Arthur had been my boss for 15 years at the accounting firm where I worked before I got married. But more than that, he had been my mentor, my friend, and maybe something more that never came to be because we were both honorable people. When my husband died, Arthur had come to the funeral. He had given me his personal card and told me in that deep voice that always calmed me, "Claire, if you ever need anything at all, you call me, no matter how much time has passed." I never called him. Pride would not let me. But now, sitting in that stranger's kitchen at 4 a.m, thinking about the betrayal of my own family, pride no longer seemed so important. By 8 a.m, when Sarah woke up, I had my plan ready. "Sarah, I need to ask you a very big favor. Whatever you need, Claire. You know you can count on me. I want you to call Michael and tell him I'm in a very bad way, that you found me crying all night, that you think I'm in shock from the fire." Sarah looked at me with concern. "But are you okay? Because if you need to see a doctor, I'm fine, better than I've been in years, but I need Jessica and Michael to believe I'm broken, that I'm desperate. Can you do that for me?" My friend nodded, though I could see in her eyes that she did not fully understand what I was asking, but she trusted me, as she had for all those years of being neighbors. While Sarah made the call, I prepared for the most important conversation of my life. I searched in my bag for the piece of paper where I had written down Arthur's number years ago. My fingers trembled as I dialed, but it was not from fear, it was from anticipation. The phone rang 3 times before he answered. "Hello?" His voice was exactly as I remembered it, deep, calm, with that slight accent he had never quite lost. "Arthur, it's Claire." There was a silence on the other end of the line, but it was not an awkward silence. It was the silence of someone processing a pleasant surprise. "Claire, after so many years, how are you?" "I've been better, Arthur. I need to talk to you. It's urgent." "Of course. Where would you like to meet?" That simple question, without doubts or questioning, reminded me why Arthur had been so important in my life. He never asked why or for what. If I needed something, he was there. We agreed to meet at a discreet cafe downtown. As I was getting ready, Sarah came back from making the call with a strange expression on her face. "Claire, I spoke with Michael. I told him you were in a very bad way, that you needed family support. And what did he say?" "He said that Jessica had spoken with a psychologist and that it was normal for older people to get like this after major traumas. That the best thing was to let you process it alone for a few days." A psychologist. Jessica had already spoken to a psychologist about me. Without consulting me, without even really knowing me. She had already diagnosed my mental state. "Anything else?" "Yes, he said if you needed anything urgently, you should call them. But for now, it was better not to bother them because Jessica was very busy helping you with the insurance paperwork." Jessica helping me with the insurance paperwork. Jessica, who yesterday had been standing in the rubble of my house, talking about selling my land without my permission. "Thank you, Sarah. You are a true friend." The cafe was almost empty when I arrived. Arthur was already there, sitting at a table in the back, reading the newspaper. When he saw me come in, he stood up immediately. He was still the same elegant man I remembered, though now his hair was completely white and he had more wrinkles around his eyes. He hugged me as if 5 years had not passed, as if we were old friends who had seen each other just last week. "You look beautiful, Claire. The years have been kind to you." It was a lie, of course. After 3 days of sleeping on strange couches and dealing with my family's betrayal, I knew I looked terrible. But Arthur had always been a gentleman. We sat down and ordered coffee. He waited patiently for me to start talking, not pressuring me, giving me the time I needed to find the right words. "Arthur, my house burned down 3 days ago." "I'm so sorry. Are you all right? Do you have a place to stay?" "I'm physically fine, but there's something more. I think the fire was not an accident." I told him everything. I told him about Jessica and her comments about my house. I told him about the real estate agent and the lies about my supposed mental confusion. I told him about the night of the fire and how my own son had closed the door on me. I told him about the shards of paint thinner bottle I had found in the rubble. Arthur listened without interrupting, with that complete attention that few men know to give. When I finished talking, he was silent for a long moment, processing everything I had told him. "Claire, are you sure about what you're telling me?" "Completely." "Then we have to act fast, and we have to act smart." "We have to." He had not said you have to act. He had said we have to. Arthur was with me. After 5 years without seeing each other, after a call out of the blue, Arthur was willing to help me without asking questions. "What do you propose?" "First, we need evidence. Second, we need to protect you. And third, we need to secure your future so that you never again have to depend on people who don't value you." Arthur took out his phone and started making calls. In 20 minutes, he had contacted a private investigator, a lawyer specializing in fraud, and a forensic accountant. "Arthur, all of this must cost a lot of money. I can't—" "Claire," he interrupted, taking my hand across the table. "5 years ago, when your husband died, I wanted to offer you help, but I knew you wouldn't accept it. Now you're giving me the chance to do what I always wanted to do, take care of you." His words touched my heart in a way I had not expected. Arthur did not see me as a burden or a responsibility. He saw me as the woman I had always been, capable and intelligent. But who needed an ally in an unequal battle? "There's one more thing, Claire. Something I need to tell you." "What?" "For all these years, I never stopped thinking about you." "Alpsin." Arthur's words hung in the air between us, like a confession that had waited decades to be spoken. "For all these years, I never stopped thinking about you." It was not a desperate declaration or an attempt to take advantage of my vulnerability. It was the simple, honest truth of a man who had kept his feelings in check out of respect. "Arthur," I began, but he gently raised his hand. "You don't need to say anything now. You just need to know that you are not alone, that you will never be alone again if you don't want to be." That afternoon, Arthur took me to his house. It was not an ostentatious mansion, but you could immediately tell it was the home of a successful man. Everything was impeccably organized. From the books on the shelves to the plants that decorated every window, it was a space of peace, so different from the emotional chaos I had been living in. "You have a room here for as long as you need," he said as he showed me a bright room with a view of the garden. "And it's not charity, Claire. It's friendship. It's what people who care about each other do for one another." That night, for the first time in days, I slept deeply. Not because my problems had disappeared, but because I finally had a plan and I had someone I could trust. The next day, our secret investigation began. The private investigator Arthur had hired was named Robert, a serious man in his 50s who had worked for insurance companies for decades. "Mrs. Claire, I'm going to need you to tell me everything again, but this time I want you to give me specific details. Dates, times, names of people present in each conversation." For 3 hours, Robert asked me questions that would never have occurred to me. Who else knew that I lived alone? Did Jessica have keys to my house? Had they been in my house without me recently? Did Michael have financial problems? That last question made me think. Michael had never asked me for money directly, but Jessica had made strange comments in recent months. Things like, "I wish we could remodel the kitchen, but you know how things are." Or, "Michael works so hard, but it seems like it's never enough." Robert, I think they might have money problems. Jessica always wanted more than they had. That gives us a motive. Now we need opportunity and method. Arthur had been quiet throughout the conversation, but now he spoke. What do we need to do to prove they started the fire? We need the fire department to conduct a more thorough investigation, and we need to watch Jessica and Michael to see what they do now that they think they've won. And while Robert worked on the official investigation, Arthur and I focused on the most delicate part of the plan, making Jessica and Michael believe that I was exactly where they wanted me to be. I asked Sarah to call Michael again. "Tell him I'm very depressed, that I can't stop crying, that I think I'm going to have to go to a nursing home because I don't have the resources to rent an apartment." "Oh, Claire, but why do you want me to tell them that?" "Because I need them to believe I'm desperate. Trust me, the strategy worked better than I expected." That same afternoon, Michael called me. It had been days since I had spoken to him directly. "Mom, Sarah told me you're in a really bad way. Jessica and I have been talking, and we think we can help you." "Really, son?" I put all the desperation I could feign into my voice. "I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't have money for an apartment. The insurance is going to take months." "It's okay, Mom. Jessica found a solution. There's a very nice place, like a residence for people your age. They have nurses, activities, everything is very organized. A nursing home. Jessica had found a nursing home for me. She wanted to lock me up in an institution while she took my land. But son, I don't want to go to a nursing home. I want to rebuild my house. Mom, be realistic. At your age, you can't be living alone. And rebuilding is going to cost a fortune you don't have." A fortune I don't have. As if Michael knew exactly what my finances were. As if he and Jessica had been investigating my bank accounts. "Jessica says she can help you with all the paperwork. Selling the land. Handling the insurance. Finding the perfect home for you. Jessica managing my life. Jessica selling my land. Jessica choosing where I would spend the rest of my days. I don't know, Michael. It's a lot to process." "I understand, Mom. But think about it. Talk to Jessica tomorrow. She has a lot of ideas to help you." When I hung up the phone, Arthur was sitting across from me with a disgusted look on his face. "Did you hear all that?" "Enough. Claire, your son and his wife didn't just burn down your house. They're planning to steal everything you have and lock you up so you can't do anything to stop them." That night, Arthur and I sat in his garden with a bottle of wine. It had been years since I had felt so calm, so in control of my own life. "Arthur, why are you helping me? Really? Why?" He thought for a moment, looking at the stars that were barely visible in the city sky. "When you worked with me, I always admired your intelligence, your strength, but I also admired your kindness. You always saw the best in people. When you got married, I thought you had chosen the right man, someone who would value those qualities. My husband did value me, I know that, but when he died, it hurt me to see you so alone, and now it hurts me to see how your own family is abusing that kindness you always had." Arthur took my hand in the darkness of the garden. "Besides, Claire, I'm 70 years old. I've built a successful company. I have more money than I could ever spend in the rest of my life, but I never got married. Do you know why?" I shook my head, though I think I already knew the answer. "Because I never found anyone who made me feel the way you made me feel during those years we worked together. And now, fate is giving me a second chance." His words filled me with a warmth I had not felt in years, but they also filled me with something more powerful: determination. Jessica and Michael had made a fundamental mistake. They had assumed I was a helpless woman, without resources, without options. They had planned my destruction based on the image of a poor, abandoned widow. But they were about to find out they had messed with the wrong woman. The meeting with Jessica was scheduled for the next day, at a cafe near what had been my house. I arrived early, not because I was anxious, but because I wanted to observe how Jessica behaved when she thought she had all the control. I saw her arrive in her new car, a model that definitely cost more than Michael earned at his job. She got out with a thick folder under her arm and that fake smile I already knew so well. She was wearing a black dress that she had probably bought to look serious and trustworthy, like a daughter concerned for her mother-in-law. "Claire, you look better," she said as she sat down across from me. "Sarah told me you'd been doing very poorly." "I've had better days," I replied, putting the weariness she expected to hear into my voice. Jessica opened her folder with efficient movements, like an executive presenting a project. There were papers, photographs of my burned house, brochures for retirement homes, and something that froze my blood, a legal document that looked like it was already partially filled out. "I've been working very hard to help you. First, I spoke with 3 different residences. This is the one I liked the most." She showed me a colorful brochure with photos of smiling seniors, playing cards, doing gentle exercises. It's called Golden Sunset, and they have a comprehensive program: balanced meals, recreational activities, 24-hour medical care. A gilded prison. That's what it was. "Jessica, it looks very institutional." "Oh no. It's very modern, very comfortable. And the best part is, you don't have to worry about a thing. They take care of everything." They take care of everything, including, I supposed, not letting me leave whenever I wanted. And how am I going to pay for something like that? It must be very expensive. Jessica smiled as if she had been waiting for that question. "That's where the second part of my plan comes in. Claire, your land is worth a lot of money, much more than you can imagine." She pulled out some aerial photographs of my property and some documents that looked like real estate appraisals. "With the sale of the land, you can pay for the residence for the rest of your life and even have money left over for other expenses." "Have you already found out how much it's worth?" "Yes. Brenda, the real estate agent you met, did an appraisal. It's valued at almost $100,000. $100,000. It was a lot of money, but I knew that my land, located in an area that was developing rapidly, was probably worth twice that." "Jessica, that seems very low for a lot that large in that location." "Claire, you have to be realistic. The lot has the debris from the house. It's going to need to be cleared. There are some issues with the paperwork. Brenda says it's a fair price considering the circumstances." Issues with the paperwork. How convenient that Jessica had already identified problems that could justify selling below the real price. And who is going to buy the land? Brenda already has an interested client, a construction company that wants to develop a housing project in the area. Everything was perfectly orchestrated. Jessica had found the buyer. She had set the price. She had chosen my new home. And she had even prepared the legal documents. "Jessica, this is a lot to process. Can I think about it for a few days?" "Of course, but don't take too long. Brenda's client is considering other lots, and the residence also has a waiting list." Time pressure, the oldest trick in the book to force hasty decisions. Jessica took out the legal document I had seen at the beginning. "While you think about it, Michael and I prepared this to make things easier for you. It was a power of attorney, a document that would give Jessica legal control over all my financial decisions. It's just to help you with the paperwork, Claire. You know how these bureaucratic things are. They're going to ask you for 1,000 papers. You're going to have to go to a lot of offices. This way, Michael and I can take care of everything while you recover from the trauma. While I recover from the trauma, as if I were a mental invalid incapable of handling my own affairs." "I don't know, Jessica. I've never signed anything like this. It's completely normal. Many people your age do it. It's for your own good. For my own good." The 4 most dangerous words that exist when spoken by someone who doesn't love you. Let me take it with me to read it over carefully. "Sure, but remember that the notary is only available this week. After that, he's on vacation for a month." More time pressure. When the meeting ended, Jessica gave me a hug that felt like the embrace of a snake. "Claire, I know this is difficult, but you'll see that it's for the best. You'll be much better cared for, without any worries. Without any worries because I would have no control over anything in my life." That afternoon, at Arthur's house, I showed him all the documents Jessica had given me. Arthur reviewed them with the attention of someone who had handled corporate contracts for decades. "Claire, this is worse than we thought." "What did you find?" "First, The appraisal of the land is completely manipulated. Your property is worth at least $200,000, not 100. Second, this residence they showed you costs exactly the amount they're going to give you for the land. You won't have any money left over. And the power of attorney? That's the most dangerous part. With this document, Jessica can sell your land, manage your money, even make medical decisions for you. You basically become her legal ward. Arthur showed me the most problematic clauses in the document. In small print and technical language, the power of attorney gave Jessica total control over my life. And if I refused to sign? That's where the most sinister part of her plan comes in. Look at this. Arthur showed me one of the residence's brochures. In the fine print on the back, there was a section about residents with limited cognitive abilities. Jessica is preparing the ground to have you declared mentally incompetent. If you refuse to sign, she'll probably say you're confused, that the trauma of the fire has affected your judgment. Can she do that? With the help of the psychologist she's already consulted and a few witnesses who say you've been acting strange, yes, she can request a mental competency evaluation. It was a perfect plan. If I cooperated, Jessica would get my money legally. If I resisted, she would have me declared crazy and get my money anyway. But Jessica had made one mistake. She had assumed that I was the same naive woman she had met years ago. She didn't know that I now had resources, allies, and above all, that I knew exactly what she was doing. Arthur, it's time for Jessica and Michael to find out who they really messed with. What do you have in mind? I'm going to sign the power of attorney. Arthur looked at me with alarm. Claire, are you sure about what you're saying? Completely sure. But I'm going to sign it with a few modifications that Jessica won't notice until it's too late. That night, Arthur and his lawyer prepared a modified version of the power of attorney. On the outside, it looked exactly like the original document, but inside, there were clauses that automatically invalidated the power if fraud was proven, and others that allowed me to revoke it at any time without prior notice. Jessica thought she had me in checkmate, but she was about to find out that I knew how to play chess too. The day I signed the power of attorney, Jessica couldn't hide her satisfaction. She arrived at the notary's office with Michael, both dressed as if they were going to an important ceremony. My son was wearing the suit I had given him for his birthday the year before, but he avoided looking me in the eye. Mom, you're doing the right thing, he told me while we waited in the notary's office. Jessica has worked very hard to organize everything. Jessica reviewed the documents one more time, making sure everything was in order. What she didn't know was that I had studied every line of the modified document all night. Arthur's lawyer had done an impeccable job. On the outside, it was exactly the same paper Jessica had prepared, but inside, it contained protections she would never imagine. Are you sure about this, Claire? The notary asked me, fulfilling his legal obligation to verify that I understood what I was signing. Completely sure, I replied with the broken voice of a defeated woman. I can't handle these things on my own anymore. Jessica smiled and put her hand on Michael's shoulder. It was the gesture of a woman who had just won the lottery. I signed the document with a trembling hand, feigning the fragility they expected to see. When I finished, Jessica practically snatched the papers from my hands. Don't worry about anything else, Claire. Michael and I will take care of everything. That afternoon, while Jessica and Michael were celebrating their victory, I was at Arthur's house coordinating the next phase of our plan. Robert, the private investigator, had obtained crucial information. Mrs. Claire, I have important news. The fire marshal completed the investigation of the fire, and they found clear evidence that it was arson. Traces of accelerant at multiple points in the house, burn patterns that indicate intentional use of flammable chemicals. It was the confirmation we needed. My house had been deliberately set on fire. Is there more? Yes. We reviewed the security cameras in the area. Your son and Jessica were at your house the night before the fire, after 11 o'clock at night. My heart stopped. It was one thing to suspect, quite another to have proof. Did the camera record them? Perfectly. We see them entering your property with bags and leaving 2 hours later without the bags. Arthur took my hand while Robert showed us the images on his computer. There they were, clear as day. My son and his wife, entering my house like thieves in the night, carrying the materials they would use to destroy my home. Is this enough to prosecute them? More than enough. But there's something else you need to know. Robert took other documents from his folder. I investigated Jessica and Michael's finances. They have debts of over $500,000, credit cards, bank loans. They even owe money to private lenders. $500,000. It was exactly the amount they planned to get after selling my land below its real value. And has Jessica already started the process to sell? This morning, 2 hours after signing the power of attorney, she was already at Brenda's office preparing the sale. Jessica had wasted no time. Now that she had legal control over my affairs, she had rushed to turn my tragedy into her financial salvation. But what Jessica didn't know was that I had also been busy that morning. While she was rushing to sell my land, I had gone to the bank with Arthur and transferred all my savings to a new account that Jessica didn't know about. While she was celebrating having legal control over my finances, I had moved all my money out of her reach. And most importantly, I had activated the secret clauses of the power of attorney. Arthur's lawyer had contacted the authorities and presented evidence of the fraud. In legal terms, the power of attorney was invalidated from the moment Jessica tried to use it to commit a crime. That night, Jessica called me euphoric. "Claire, I have wonderful news. The buyer accepted our offer. We can close the sale next week. So soon? Yes, they're very interested. And I've already reserved your spot at Golden Sunset. You can move in next month." Next month. Jessica had my life completely planned out. By next month, I would be locked up in a residence while she enjoyed the money she had obtained by burning down my house. Jessica, what if I change my mind? There was a silence on the other end of the line. Then, Jessica spoke with a voice I had never heard before. Cold, calculating, threatening. "Claire, you already signed the power of attorney. You can't change your mind anymore. I make the decisions now, and I've decided this is what's best for you. And if I don't want to go to the residence, then we'll have to talk to the doctor about your mental state. Sarah already told me you've been very confused, saying strange things about the fire. Michael and I are worried about you." There it was, the threat I had been waiting for. If I didn't cooperate, Jessica would use my mental confusion to justify locking me up against my will. "Jessica, are you threatening me?" "I'm not threatening you, Claire. I'm protecting you. From yourself." When I hung up the phone, Arthur was looking at me with admiration. "You just got her to confess. Everything. Over the phone." "How?" "Robert has been recording all your calls since yesterday. We have Jessica admitting that she's going to use your supposed mental confusion to control you. Admitting that you can no longer change your mind about decisions that affect your life. It was the last piece of the puzzle. We now had evidence of the arson, evidence of financial fraud, and evidence that Jessica planned to have me declared incompetent to maintain control over my life. When do we act? Arthur smiled with that smile that reminded me why I had fallen for him decades ago. Tomorrow. Tomorrow, Jessica and Michael are going to get the surprise of their lives. That night I slept better than I had in weeks. Not because my problems were over, but because I was finally going to get justice. Jessica and Michael had played with me as if I were a helpless old woman. They had burned my house. They had tried to steal my money. They had planned to lock me up for the rest of my life. But they had forgotten something fundamental. The woman they were trying to destroy had been successful long before she met them. She had built a life. She had worked. She had learned to fight. And now, I was going to remind them who Claire really was. The morning of the confrontation dawned with a clear sky, as if even the universe knew it was a day for justice. Jessica had summoned everyone to the notary's office to sign the sale of the land. She arrived early, as she always did when she was in a hurry to get something, accompanied by Michael and Brenda, the real estate agent. I arrived a few minutes later, feigning the fragility of a defeated woman. I was wearing the black dress I had worn to my husband's funeral, my most comfortable shoes, and a small purse, as if I didn't have many important possessions. Jessica saw me and smiled with that satisfaction I knew so well. "Claire, I'm so glad you came. Today is a very important day for your future." What Jessica didn't know was that Arthur was parked outside with Robert, waiting for my signal. What she didn't know was that the lawyer had already presented all the evidence to the authorities. What she didn't know was that her perfect day was about to turn into her worst nightmare. "Good morning, Jessica." "Good morning, son." Michael greeted me with a kiss on the cheek that felt like a betrayal. For all those years, he had been my boy, my only son, the center of my world. But now, watching him prepare to rob me, I realized that he had long ceased to be my son and had become Jessica's accomplice. Brenda spread all the documents on the notary's table. The sales contract, the transfer papers, the bank document specifying that Jessica would receive the money as my legal representative. "All right, Claire, we just need you to sign here, here, and here," Brenda said, pointing to the lines marked with small X's. "Are you sure the price is fair?" I asked, feigning one last doubt. Jessica tensed slightly. "Claire, we've already talked about this. Brenda is a professional. She knows what she's doing. It's just that $100,000 seems low for such a large piece of land." "Mom," Michael intervened with that condescending voice he had learned from Jessica. "You have to trust us. We're looking out for your future. Looking out for my future." As if locking me in a residence and stealing my assets was an act of filial love. I took the pen and pretended I was going to sign. At that moment, my phone rang. It was the signal I had arranged with Arthur. "Sorry, this is important. It's from the hospital where my husband worked. Something about his benefits." I answered the phone and spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. "What was that? You're saying my land is valued at $200,000? That someone submitted false documents?" Jessica turned pale instantly. Brenda stopped smiling. Michael looked at me with confusion. "What are they saying?" Jessica tried to take the phone from me. "Claire, you're confused." "I'm not confused, Jessica. For the first time in months, I see everything with perfect clarity." At that moment, Arthur entered the office accompanied by Robert and 2 police officers. Jessica recoiled as if she had seen a ghost. "Who is this man?" Jessica shouted. "Brenda, call security." "I am Arthur Cole," he said with that calm voice that had always reassured me. "I am Mrs. Claire's attorney, and I'm here to stop a fraud." "Fraud? What are you talking about?" Michael seemed genuinely confused. "Mom, what's going on?" Robert approached the table and placed a thick folder full of evidence on top of the sales documents. "Mrs. Jessica, you are under arrest for arson, real estate fraud, and attempted swindling. That's ridiculous," Jessica screamed, but her voice sounded desperate. "Claire is senile. She doesn't know what she's saying. We have video of you and Mr. Michael entering Mrs. Claire's property the night before the fire," Robert continued. "We have forensic evidence of the accelerant you used, and we have recordings of your conversations where you admit to the fraud." Michael sank into a chair as if his legs couldn't support him. "Mom, I didn't know that, Jessica." "Yes, you did know, Michael." I interrupted him with a voice I had never used with him before. "You were there when they burned my house. You were there when they closed the door in my face. You were there for every single lie. Jessica told me it was for the best, that you were losing your memory, that it was dangerous for you to live alone, and you believed her because it was convenient for you to believe her." Jessica tried to run for the door, but one of the police officers stopped her. As they put the handcuffs on her, she looked at me with a hatred I didn't know she was capable of feeling. "This isn't over. I'm going to prove you're crazy. No one is going to believe a senile old woman. The problem, Jessica, is that no one is going to believe you anymore." Arthur came over to me and took my hand in front of everyone. It was the first time we had publicly shown that we had a relationship that went beyond the professional. "Claire, are you okay?" "I'm perfect." As they took Jessica away in handcuffs, Brenda was trying to explain to the police that she knew nothing about the fraud, that she was just doing her job. Michael remained seated in the chair, his head in his hands, crying like a child. "Mom, forgive me. I didn't know it would go this far. Michael, you burned my house, not Jessica alone. You, my son, burned down the house where I raised you." "But," Jessica said a lot of things, but you made the decisions." I walked over to where he was sitting and knelt down to be at his level, as I had done so many times when he was a child and needed comfort. "Son, for 35 years, I was your mother before anything else. I put your well-being before my own. Your happiness before mine. I worked, I sacrificed, I saved every penny thinking about your future. I know, Mom. No, you don't know. Because if you did, you would never have agreed to take away my home, my dignity, my freedom. Michael cried harder, but I no longer felt sorry for him. For weeks I had cried, feeling betrayed and abandoned. Now it was his turn to face the consequences of his decisions. Will you forgive me? The question I had been waiting for, the question all mothers fear having to answer one day. Michael, forgiveness is something that is earned, not something that is given away, and you have a lot of work to do before you earn it. Arthur helped me up, and we walked out of the office together. Outside, Sarah was waiting for us. She had come to support me on what she knew would be a difficult day. How do you feel? She asked me. Free. For the first time in months, I feel completely free. That afternoon, Arthur and I went to dinner at an elegant restaurant downtown. We toasted with a glass of wine to justice, to truth, and to new beginnings. What are you going to do now? He asked me. I'm going to rebuild my house. But this time, I'm going to build it exactly the way I want it. And us? What's going to happen with us? I looked him in the eyes. This man who had appeared in my life like a guardian angel when I needed him most. Arthur, I'm 63 years old. I don't have time for games or for doing things out of obligation anymore. If we're going to be together, it's going to be because we really want to build something beautiful. He smiled and took my hand across the table. Claire, I've waited decades for this opportunity. I'm not going to waste it. 1 year later, I am sitting in the garden of my new house, drinking chamomile tea while I watch the sunrise paint the mountains in golden colors. The house I rebuilt is nothing like the old one. It's smaller, brighter, with large windows that let in all the possible light. Each room was designed with my comfort, my needs, and what I really want for this stage of my life in mind. Arthur is still asleep. He moved in with me 6 months ago, after a marriage proposal he made to me in this very garden, among the hydrangea flowers I planted in honor of my late husband. It wasn't a traditional marriage, but a union of two mature people who decided to share the time they have left with honesty and true affection. Jessica is serving an 8-year sentence for arson and fraud. Michael received 5 years, but with the possibility of parole for cooperating with the investigation. For the first few months, I tried to visit him in prison, but each meeting ended with him blaming me for his situation, saying that if I had been more understanding, more flexible, none of this would have happened. The last time I saw him, 4 months ago, he said something that finally freed me from any remaining guilt. Mom, Jessica was right. You're selfish. You only think about yourself. That sentence hurt me for days. Not because it was true, but because it confirmed something I already knew. My son had chosen to be his wife's accomplice to the very end. There was no real remorse, no understanding of the harm he had done me, only self-pity and resentment. I decided not to visit him again. The sale of my old house's land was completed at its real price, $210,000. With that money, plus the insurance that finally paid out, and the investments Arthur helped me make, I have financial security for the rest of my life. But more important than the money is the peace of mind I've found. Sarah comes over for lunch with me every Tuesday. We've developed a deeper friendship since what happened, based on the understanding that women our age have to look out for each other. She never asks about Michael, and I appreciate that. Some wounds need time to heal, and constantly talking about them only keeps them open. My doorbell rarely rings. I have few visitors, and I like it that way. But this morning I hear the familiar sound, and from the window I see a car I don't recognize parked in my driveway. Arthur wakes up with the noise and walks to the door with me. On the other side of the glass is a young woman, about 25 years old, with the brown hair and green eyes of my family. She's holding a baby who can't be more than 6 months old. It's Emily, Michael's daughter, my granddaughter. I haven't seen her in 2 years. Jessica had always been very jealous of my relationship with her, and after the marriage, she had practically cut off all contact. During the trial, Emily didn't show up to support her father or Jessica. She simply disappeared from our lives. "Grandma," she says when I open the door, and her voice sounds exactly like Michael's when he was a child. "Emily, can I come in?" I want you to meet my son. Arthur gently squeezes my hand, reminding me that I have the power to decide who enters my life and who doesn't. It's a lesson I've learned well this year. Why are you here now? Because I needed time to process everything, to understand what happened, and because I want you to know that I never agreed with what they did. Did you know what they were planning? Emily looks down. I knew Mom talked a lot about your house, about you being too old to live alone, but I never thought they would go that far. And why didn't you warn me? Because I was scared. Because it was easier to believe that Mom had good intentions. Her honesty touches me. She's not trying to completely justify herself. She's not blaming others for her silence. She's admitting she was scared, that she took the easy way out. Emily, I understand you were scared, but your silence cost me my house, my security, my trust in my own family. I know, and I don't expect you to forgive me immediately. But I want to try to rebuild our relationship, if you'll let me. I look at the baby in her arms. He's beautiful, with that perfect skin that only newborns have, and a serene expression that reminds me of Michael as a baby. What's his name? Leo, after Grandpa, after my husband. Emily named her son after my husband. His father? He's not in our lives. I decided to raise Leo on my own, a single mother, as I had been for so many years after being widowed. A young woman facing the world with a baby in her arms and no family support. Where do you live? In a small apartment near downtown. I work in an accounting office. Accounting, as I had worked, as I had met Arthur. Arthur whispers in my ear, "The decision is yours, Claire. But remember that grandchildren are not to blame for their parents' mistakes." He's right. Leo is not to blame for what Michael and Jessica did. And Emily, although she didn't defend me when she could have, did not actively participate in the betrayal. You can come in, but I want you to understand something, Emily. Whatever you need to tell me. This house is my sanctuary. It's the place where I've found peace after everything I've been through. If you're going to be a part of my life again, it has to be with complete honesty, no secrets, no divided loyalties. I promise you it will be. Emily comes in with her baby, and Arthur makes coffee for everyone. We sit in the living room, and for the first time in 2 years, I have my granddaughter in my house. Leo wakes up and starts to cry, and I automatically extend my arms to hold him. It's amazing how the muscle memory of being a grandmother comes back immediately. Leo calms down in my arms, and I feel that instant connection that only exists between grandmothers and grandchildren. Grandma, can you tell me what really happened? Dad and Jessica told me one version, but after the trial, I realized there were lies in everything. For the next hour, I tell her the whole truth. I tell her about Jessica's manipulations, about the arson, about the night they closed the door in my face. Emily cries when I tell her the hardest details, especially when I explain how I felt when I discovered that my own son had participated in destroying my life. Do you think Dad can change? I don't know, Emily. And it's no longer my responsibility to help him change. He has to make that decision for himself. And me? Do you think I can earn your trust again? I look at this young woman who carries my blood, who is raising my great-grandson alone, who had the courage to come find me after 2 years of silence. I think you've already started to earn it. You came here. You told me the truth. And you brought Leo for me to meet. That means more than you can imagine. Emily comes to visit me every Sunday now. She brings Leo, who is bigger and more alert every week. Arthur has developed a special relationship with him, and sometimes I find them in the garden, Arthur reading him stories, while Leo looks at him with that absolute attention that only babies have. Last month, Emily asked if she could spend Christmas with me. It was the first time in years that someone had asked to share an important date with me out of a genuine desire to be with me, not out of family obligation. We spent a beautiful Christmas. Arthur cooked a turkey. I made my famous apple pie, and Emily brought gifts for everyone. Leo had more fun with the gift boxes than with the toys, and we all laughed watching his antics. At night, after Emily had left, Arthur and I sat in the garden watching the stars. "Are you happy?" he asked. "I am happy," I replied, without hesitation. But it's a different kind of happiness than I knew before. Different. How? Before, my happiness depended on making others happy. Now, my happiness depends on being at peace with myself. Arthur kissed my forehead with a tenderness that reminds me every day why it's worth starting over at 63. This morning, as I write in my journal about this year of rebuilding, I know my story is not unique. There are many women my age who have been betrayed by families who see them as a burden, who have lost everything they built over decades of work and sacrifice. But I also know that there is hope, that it's never too late to reclaim your life, to set boundaries, to decide who deserves to be in your world and who doesn't. Jessica and Michael thought they had defeated me. They thought I was a weak woman, without resources, without options. But they were wrong. Not only did I survive their betrayal, but I found a better life on the other side of the pain. Now, when I see the sunrise from my garden, I don't think about what I lost. I think about what I gained: my dignity, my freedom, and the understanding that I deserve true love at any stage of my life. Michael gets out of prison next year. I don't know if he will try to contact me. If he does, I'm prepared for that conversation. But I am no longer the woman I was 2 years ago. I am stronger, wiser, and above all, I am a woman who has finally learned to put herself first. Leo babbles from his crib, and Arthur is waking up. It's time to begin another day in this life I built from the ashes of the old one, a life that is completely my own.